as they come in.
I've
Thank
started
you
recording.
for starting the recording so we don't forget. And then just as a reminder for people, I'm gonna paste the link to the agenda in the chat. There we go. Okay. So for the first part, introductions, I think I think most of us have been on this call before, but if you are new, if you don't mind giving a little just like 2 or 3 sentences about where you sit in the states and or your participation in state of Alaska UAS operations, and where you work, that would be, let's see, so yeah, 2 or 3. I guess that's 2 or 3 items. And if we could start with Tracy, because I do know Tracy's new to our group for these meetings.
Yeah, thank you. I've always I should have been attending, and always something came up. I'm more tangentially involved. We tried to contract for some UAS flights for LiDAR acquisition a few years ago, and we could just never get approvals for it through our GPSC contracting mechanism. But I know over the years from the Alaska Mapping Executive Committee, we've been very desirous of thinking that there might be some real opportunities here, especially now as things have matured so much, to do some of this collection. And so I'm just excited from that perspective. I'm the from our national geospatial program context, national mapping, really focused on data acquisition of LiDAR imagery and maybe some other sensor mechanisms as we move forward, and that support science and resilience and hazard mitigation and response. So we're very interested from that perspective. I'm the chair of our what we call the Alaska Mapping Technical Subcommittee under the Alaska Mapping Executive Committee. So I personally am not involved in day-to-day operations, although I've had different training classes in UAS, but we more from a contracting mechanism probably. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. Let's see, is there anybody else who is new to our group who'd like to introduce themselves?
Yeah, Frank Marley. I'm with BLM Alaska. I'm the Abandoned Mine Lands and Hazmat Coordinator for the Anchorage Field Office. New to UAS for BLM. Outside of BLM, I fly UAS for the state troopers in a SAR capacity. And then I also do UAS for a project I've been working in Greenland on the ice cap.
Great. Thanks for joining us. Okay. So moving into roundtable announcements and news, there's an item that's actually on our action items, but it's something that our group is going to have to tackle. So that's why it's under action items. But I wanted to give it the announcement now while we still have folks, because I have a feeling at the end of this meeting, people will start to drop off. But Russell and I have been acting as the co-chairs of this group for almost 2 years now. And although there is no time limit set within the Geospatial Council Charter for chair terms, we wanted to offer up the opportunity for other people to take the role of chair, but also I am no longer able to do a chair. I'm no longer able to commit to being the chair for this group. So we absolutely need to find one replacement, and then ideally we'll be able to find 2. So we can talk more about what that's going to look like further on in the as far as the nomination process, it's really just if you want to nominate yourself or nominate somebody else, you can email us. But if you have questions about all of that, I think we'll probably save it for the end, where we talk about what that's going to look like in voting for this group. And then updates on legislation impacting the UAS community. Is there anybody on this call that has any updates about policy, either federal or state, that they're aware of that they feel like this group needs to know about?
The only one on there mostly affects the state folks is the 2025 NDAA and the 1-year time limit for Autel and DGI to show their if they're safe or not, which mostly affects state people and private contractors, private people, private industry. So other than that, I have nothing.
On the federal side, there's just a lot of uncertainty right now. So I think the guidance we've been given is that, continue on with all of the prior orders and policies that are in place. So that's what we're going with. But as we all know, there's quite often some adjustments that are made with incoming administrations. So we will see how that pans out both at like a departmental level. So people like myself, Park Service, USGS, but then also within our different agencies inside the bureaus. Okay. Moving on, we've got actually a lot to talk about, so don't want to spend too much time. If I cut you off and you want to chime in, go ahead, please. But try to keep this moving along. Got the meeting link to the meeting minutes from the last meeting and all the things that we talked about there. And then coming into our member presentation, let's see, Clay had agreed at our last meeting that he would be willing to give a presentation on some of the work that he's been doing with multispectral sensors and looking at spruce bark beetle phases, spruce bark beetle infestation phases. Clay, were you able to get connected to your VPN today?
No, but I did find some draft results that will work for a short presentation.
Great. Awesome. Okay. Let's see. So if you want to, we'll go ahead and switch to sharing for your screen. I think
Yeah, let's see here. Ooh. All right. So I've shared. Are you seeing anything yet?
Yes, I do see something.
The PowerPoint.
Yep.
Okay.
And so then, yeah, if you just want to give a few sentences about your background, because I'm not sure if everybody on the call, you did introduce yourself a little bit last time, but just for a refresher.
Sure, yeah. I'm a forester for Chugachmiut, which is an Alaska Native nonprofit that serves the Chugach region. And we also serve as a little forestry consulting shop for Alaska Native organizations throughout the state. But a bulk of our work has been, we have two fire crews and one hazardous fuels reduction crew. And they've been busy on the Kenai Peninsula for the last 10 years, implementing the Sterling fuel break, which is like a 50-mile long continuous fuel break around the communities of Sterling, Soldotna, Kenai, and Nikiski. And I finished up graduate school a little over a year ago. And this was my graduate thesis, and it was born out of this problem that we had in 2019, where we were trying to implement these treatments. And Kenai Peninsula has a kind of a unique problem with grass. As soon as you remove trees and open up that ground cover to sunlight, Calamagrostis in particular pioneers in, and it's a native grass, but that poses problems for wildfire risk because it's light and flashy. In winters like this winter, when you don't have a lot of snow cover, you're going to have in April and May a lot of dead grass laying on snow. some wildfires, like the Card Street fire in 2014 was a real scary one, it started in Calamagrostis. So we're trying to implement these shaded fuel breaks where you take out a large majority of the stem density, but you're leaving shade trees. But we were trying to do this during the spruce beetle outbreak, which became challenging. You have firefighters, which aren't necessarily trained in forest health, and we're saying, okay, I know the tree is green, but they're infested, and 90% of these trees are going to die. So please, cut down the ones that have beetles in them. And we started realizing these are expensive and take a long time to implement. And these shaded fuel breaks that took, all summer to treat, we noticed, and there's a lot of beetle killed trees the next year. So we thought, hey, I wonder if we can come up with a tool to help inform the field crew. And this was my graduate project. So what I did here was take a over-the-counter kind of commercial-grade multispectral drone and tried to build a drone-based tool for predicting spruce beetle infestation in green-crowned trees. So I'll kind of jump into it here. And I haven't looked at this in a year, so bear with me if I'm a little foggy. I'm going to kind of skip over. Everyone kind of knows what's going on with the spruce beetle in South Central Alaska. It's kind of run its course, at least down here. I don't know what's going on up by the park, actually, but it kind of started in 2016 and rolled through the Matsu Valley and the Kenai Peninsula, and we're well over 2 million acres of mortality. And current methods of mapping spruce beetle outbreak right now is really like, the forest health folks in the back of an airplane and a tablet looking for red crown spruce trees, ones that have already been dead. They're kind of looking to the past here. But the active spruce beetle infestation takes getting on the ground and looking at trees right now anyways, where you're looking for pitch tubes and boring dust at the base of them.
Hey, Clay.
Yeah.
Do you have 2 screens?
Oh, am I sharing the one that has like the notes and
Not the notes. We're just seeing the whole outline. So yeah, if you could just switch over.
let's see here.
Thanks.
Here, I'm going to stop sharing real quick.
Hey, Brady, this is Charlie. I was just seeing the slide deck off to the left from my perspective, so I don't know if that is different than what you were seeing.
That's all I saw, and you could just maybe do a start slideshow or something. I don't know.
Yeah, let me see. I'm going to start slideshow. Oh, let's see. Sorry about this. Okay, I'm going to share this. Let me see. From current slide, is this better? Or are you seeing this kind of multiple?
No, not seeing anything. Still just the slide deck.
Okay,
but not a presentation mode. There is the monitors option there. So instead of having.
Okay, this is not any better?
Nah.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's see.
There's there's the drop down for the monitors, where you can switch which is your main monitor.
Okay. Let's see, monitors.
It almost seems like you could
present in Teams in that upper right hand corner. That has worked usually internally for us. I don't know about like when you're dialed into an external meeting. Yeah, there. That looks like a slideshow. And Clay, I think you're on mute.
Wow, I'm getting my butt kicked today. All right.
All right. Yeah, we see current methods for detecting bark beetle.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so current methods are looking at red crown spruce trees and drawing a polygon on a tablet. And so we think, we can maybe inform our fuel break design and implementation with a tool if we can identify green attack, which is green crown spruce trees that are infested with spruce beetle. And there's a lot of uses for it. But that's one we were interested in. Here's some pictures of, pitch tubes. This is kind of how we had to train the crew. You're going to look for this stuff. I know the tree's green. It's probably going to die. So look for your pitch tubes and your boring dust, and that's going to be a tree you want to remove. This is a shaded fuel break. So these are the treatments that we were struggling with spruce beetle. A lot of these trees in this particular picture were infested with spruce beetle, and they're green. So the fire folks were, they were kind of surprised when they came the next year, and 70% of these trees were dead, and we had kind of a fuels risk in our fuel break. But as far as this tool, this is kind of our initial conceptual model of what we're going to try and do here. We know that this green line right here, which is just sketched, is kind of the general reflectance profile across the visible bands, which are on this drone. Your blue, your green, and your red. That's what we observe when we look at tree, the combination of these things. But in the blue and the red ranges, photosynthesis, you have chlorophyll absorbing light in that range. So you're going to have a lower reflectance value here. In your green, you're going to have a higher reflectance value. That's why we observe trees as green, as they're not absorbing as much here. And in the longer wavelength, which the drone actually has a red edge, which is just longer wavelength, just a little bit longer than the red, but it's non-visible to us. And in near infrared range, we have really high reflectance values in a healthy tree. And so we thought, in an infested tree, photosynthesis will probably decrease. That tree is sick, and you're going to see some increase in the visible range in your blue and your red bands that maybe we can detect. But we thought that maybe we're going to see a really big decrease in this long range reflectance in the near infrared range. And the idea here is this reflectance in conifers is controlled by the structure of the cell, the mesophyll. So when it's hydrated and it's healthy, it reflects most of that long wave energy back. And as that architecture, the mesophyll, starts failing, whether it's dehydrated or other reasons, that longer wavelength is going to penetrate and transmit through those needles. So we were hoping to pick up a big signal in this near infrared range. First things first, we went out into the field. We found a study site on the Kenai Peninsula outside of Soldotna where there was a lot of green attacks. So beetles were in this area at least the summer previous, and they were actively infesting these trees, but there was a lot of green crown spruce. So we went out with high accuracy GPS and simply logged the location of the tree and labeled it as infested or not infested to get some training data here. I'm going to zoom through this stuff to save some time. And then we flew these sites. So this is coming out of the drone. You have a blue band, a green band, a red edge band, and a near infrared band. You also have a color sensor, so you have an RGB sensor to get some color imagery. And we'd process this stuff into individual tiles, and we also developed a digital surface model for automation later. Crown data. So what we did is we manually delineated some crowns here and extracted all the reflectance values across our multispectral bands. And doing some due diligence, we found a group in the Czech Republic that was doing a similar thing, and they had some success with these vegetation indices, which is just a combination of these reflectance values. So we would extract the mean reflectance value across bands and do a little math to derive some vegetation index values. And here's just, this is looking at just the reflectance profile on the Centennial Lake site, which is the Kenai Peninsula site. And what we expected was to see increased reflectance in sick trees in this visible range. And we saw that across 3 sensing periods from June to August. The surprise here was that the relationship in the near infrared range was kind of inverse of what we expected. These infested trees posted higher reflectance in near infrared range. And you can also notice here, we learned some lessons about sensing and light conditions. Out of those 3 sensing periods, we really had one that produced good data, and it was consistent high cloud cover. You notice in the June and the August sensing periods, we have lots of shadows. It was a really beautiful sunny day, nice for flying drones, no rain, but the shadows kind of fudged up our data. So we learned some lessons, but in our good data, we saw a relationship we didn't really expect. Here's a better look at it. So you notice these infested trees, a little higher reflectance. I think we had 120 trees in this sample. After learning some lessons in our little pilot study site, we kind of chased the edge of the beetles up towards Denali in between Cantwell and Healy. And for a couple reasons, this was a great site. The spruce forest up there is generally low density. The spruce trees are nice and pointing. There's not a lot of hardwood cover, open ground. So it was easy to locate trees and get a nice sample size. At the Denali site, we saw a similar pattern in the visible range and really not much of a pattern in that near infrared range. So kind of our idea of having a nice big signal in that long wave range is not coming to fruition at this point. Here's a look at just comparing these vegetation indices between groups, healthy trees and infested trees. And at Centennial Lake, where you saw that big, that higher reflectance in infested trees, the vegetation indices that posted the biggest difference was a normalized difference index between the near infrared band and the green band, and the red edge band and the green band. At Denali, the difference between the indices occurred in the visible range, so our green and our red band. You notice that there wasn't much of a difference or a pattern in those longer wave sensors. So they didn't really agree. So they're different. And what you're going to find here, I'm not going to bore you guys with this, but when we pumped these predictors into our model, we used a generalized linear model. There wasn't one predictive model that ruled them all. So between sites, the best model was different. It had different vegetation indices in it as inputs. The Centennial Lake model, our best one, was this normalized difference red edge red and near infrared green as predictors was our best model. At Denali, like I said before, we just used the red and the green band, a ratio of green to red plus green as our predictors. So that model, what it does is each crown gets assigned a probability of infestation from 0 to 1. And naturally, kind of the default is anything over 50% probability of infestation will classify it as infested. We looked at the training data and ran some analysis on it and found out that's probably not the optimal threshold if we want a really balanced model. We don't want to over-predict infested trees or healthy trees. So this is data from a ROC curve. And so what we find here is our optimal threshold where we have balanced predictions and are healthy and are infested is somewhere, around 0.41 here. So this means it's a nice balanced model, and its accuracy, this is Centennial Lake. The accuracy at Centennial Lake was high, 76%, which was kind of outstanding. But we also developed, the whole idea here was to inform a fuel break, a shaded fuel break, where you're removing a lot of healthy trees anyway. So we kind of developed an idea to intentionally bias this model, and we called it a management threshold, where we can move this threshold, this probability threshold down and capture more accuracy in the infested class and sacrifice some of our prediction accuracy in the healthy class. So the management threshold applied to the Centennial Lake, the Kenai Peninsula site, you notice we actually had 90%, we captured 90% of those infested predictions, and our healthy predictions were low. We classified a lot of healthy trees as infested. But if you apply this to a fuel break, you're going to be removing a lot of those trees anyway. So this was kind of an interesting point of the work here. So after we decided which model we're going to use and which threshold we're going to use, we tried to automate all these methods. So here, this is a Denali site. we take all of our bands and make mosaics of all of our bands, derive these indices, and then we generate a digital surface model, which is this stuff right here. And from there, we use some zonal statistics to make a really rough bare earth model, do some more math to make a canopy height model, which gives a height value for each tree. So you subtract that surface model from the bare earth model and you end up with this canopy height model. At this point, we invert the crowns, and this is all coded in Python, invert the crowns into little depressions and use some watershed tools to delineate those little depressions, convert them to polygons, and now we have a polygon we can extract that multispectral data, take an average, and create predictors, drive those veg indices and create predictors. So, and our automation at Denali was really good. It was like 81% of our sample trees we captured. So it's pretty good accuracy. At that Centennial site, it's more lowland boreal forests with lots of broadleaf and shrubs, and it was pretty awful. It's not active sensing, it's passive. So you end up with all kinds of artifact, and I think we were like around like 30%. So this would probably only work in one of these low density spruce forests. But here's the results for the Denali site. Our overall accuracy was 65%, 66%. I think this is our September collection. Yeah, it is September. Our July collection and our August collection were lower overall accuracy. Management threshold down here, you can see we moved that threshold lower so we could have better accuracy in our infested class and sacrifice that healthy classification accuracy. And we ended up with 90% accuracy in our infested class with our management threshold and about 40% in predicting healthy trees. And kind of the last step here is we haven't got to apply this yet because all our spruce trees are dead. But what I did is ran this automation and took a sample of about 800 trees and applied the 3 best candidate models on both the optimal threshold, that balanced one, and the management threshold. And the idea here is if you pretend this is a treatment unit for a shaded fuel break, you kind of get an idea of what this looks like. And our best model down here in the center on the management threshold, this is maybe a product you could give a fuels reduction crew. And you know, I don't know if it would be something that at the tree level where they're going to walk up to a tree and make a decision, but at the very least, it'll give you a pattern where you could inform a crew and say, hey, look, at the northern end of this unit, we're going to have a lot of leaf trees. These are our shade trees. In the center here, there's a lot of infested trees you're going to remove. And of course, you know, in this instance right here, a lot of these, the yellow dots, the infested, predicted infested, there's going to be a large proportion that are actually healthy. But for the purpose of a shaded fuel break, you'll be removing a lot of those anyways. So this is kind of just a shot at applying this this model and management. And it's interesting, you can see this pattern persist through really all of the models across thresholds. But yeah, that's kind of a quick and dirty presentation of results from that project. Any questions?
Let's see. So Clay gave this presentation to Denali during a time where we were hosting Denali National Park and Preserve, when we were hosting a Spruce Bark Beetle Summit due to concerns within the community of the infestations that were moving to the north. And at that time, you know, this sort of tool was a really great thing for a park in that they are, and especially in the front country, managing more on an individual tree basis as opposed to landscape. So we had discussed with Clay the possibility of partnering to do UAS flights in the park, applying these same methods. One of the things we identified is that the UAS that Clay was using is a DJI UAS, and we had a different multispectral camera on our that we were able to attach to one of our approved UAS. And we decided that at the park level, we were going to try to tackle it with a UAS. However, Clay, I don't think we ever followed up on this. I wanted to tell you, as we dug more into some of the documentation that you had presented, the peer-reviewed journal articles, we identified that shortwave infrared is also used within some of those indices that you were showing at the very beginning. And so we actually were going to partner with Mark Laker at Fish and Wildlife Service to use a crude sensor that also has it has red edge near infrared, in addition to the ability to be outfitted with a shortwave infrared sensor. And unfortunately, we weren't able to get that off the ground due to limitations with the availability of crude pilots. But it certainly has been this presentation jump-started quite a bit of conversation and hopes and dreams and proposals for projects that will certainly happen within the future in our park. So I wanted to let you know we really appreciated what you presented on.
Hey, another thing, I haven't followed up. I kind of, dropped this and started running towards snag modeling projects. But I was working on Otna ground, and right across the highway from me, UAF, was it Jesse Paulette Young, her lab, they were collecting a massive amount of data with a more robust drone and had a lot of sensors on it. I don't know a lot of details, but I don't know if you're in the loop on what they're doing, but I'm sure they have a lot of data.
Oh, yeah. I think I recall that coming up in the conversation. Yeah. Does anybody else have questions over Clay?
Brendan, you pretty much answered my question. I was wondering if you could attach a Altum sensor with the shortwave already connected to it and enhance your data set to do more discrimination. And that can be mounted to like an Atlas or one of the blue UAS drones, the bigger ones. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Clay, did you so I know that this was part of your graduate work, but I don't think we ever got like a thesis or an article from you.
Okay, yeah.
One?
I have a thesis. I haven't published, and I don't know if that's going to happen, or I haven't even went down that road because I got real busy. But I do have a thesis I can share with you. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. If you wanted to share it with this group or just me individually, and we could share it out within the park in this group, that'd be great.
Okay, yeah, will do.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you so much for presenting, Clay. That was really interesting. Okay. So moving on to the report status on action items. So as folks might recall, over the past 2 years, we have done a lot of soul searching within this group. We started out with those surveys that identified issues and things that we wanted to work on. And then we brought that into our charter, created a charter, presented that to the Greater Alaska Geospatial Council. And from there, we identified 2 things that we wanted to work on for outreach and education. And one of those was to create a land status map. And then the other one was to consolidate existing operation plans that we have at varying levels of government and private industry and the academic world, and pull those all in to identify common denominators so that we would be able to then stand up within a template and share out onto the same platform that we would be sharing the land status map, which we've identified as going to be the Alaska Geospatial Council's hub site that we have our own little web page on for the UAS Technical Working Group. In our search for, or in our kind of our unofficial work plan design, we identified that there was a lot of work that we needed to get done, and Denali had the capacity to bring on board what we call a volunteer in the park, a VIP, and we were able to stand up that position, advertise that position. If folks aren't really familiar with VIP in National Park Service, it's a highly competitive application process, actually. And we get people from all around the world who are incredibly skilled. So we were able to hire someone, and his name is Michael Barron. I believe he is on currently, and I want to give him the opportunity to give a brief introduction of himself, what his experience is, what he's currently doing, and then I can you can hand it back over to me, and I will talk about what our next steps are.
Yes, thank you, Britta. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I gotcha.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Barron. I want to first and foremost thank Britta for taking me on for this opportunity. I'm super excited about it. I am active duty Air Force, currently serving in Guam. I am stationed in Alaska, but I am currently deployed to Guam. I guess I should clarify. I've got 19 years in the Air Force. I will be returning to Alaska here shortly, probably around April. I am my squadron's UAS program manager. We do utilize UAS for certain runway repair activities. It's very limited to that mission set, but I do have an educational background in GIS, more specifically Geographic Information Science. So I just finished up my graduate program in August, and started looking into volunteer opportunities to branch into that specific career field. So I do have some cartographic experience and experience working with WebGIS or some of the online ArcGIS online features. So working in this, getting this opportunity to volunteer and work on developing the web map for the National Park Service, and more specifically in Denali, I really I'm looking forward to making a product that you guys can be proud of and that we can all share in. So really, I guess the purpose of me attending this meeting was to get some of that information from you all to more to help finalize that final product, and get some ideas on what everybody's vision of that final product might be. So if anybody has any information as far as what we would like to see in the web map, I'm all ears. Or if anybody has any questions for me specifically.
Yeah, does anybody have questions for Michael specifically about his background or his interests? We do. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is more of the formal generalization or formal generation of the work plan, as well as diving into that operators map that Michael is specifically addressing right now. Because we brought him on as a National Park Service VIP, we're able to task him with things that are related to UAS and the Park Service's interest in the UAS, as well as giving him the skill set within the National Park Service to, make it, I think, a great product all around to produce products within the National Park Service that are going to also benefit the National Park Service. So I'm trying to do too many things at once. We have a Excel sheet that Russell and I probably, I would say at least a year ago, we had taken all of the different topics that were discussed in the survey, and we had pulled those into an Excel sheet to identify how we could lump things together and prioritize what we were going to work on. And that was kind of what we were calling the work plan at the time. Since then, especially when bringing on Michael, I wanted to have something that was a little bit more formal, especially because that's technically within our charter that we need to create annual work plans. I'm assuming they probably need to be in a Word document as opposed to a bunch of Excel sheets. So I have a link to this proposed work plan for 2025 that I wrote up, and it's mainly, focusing on those education components that we've talked about, the land status map, and then some of our operations templates, other things that we identified within our priorities, not for necessarily this year, but for the long term, which were best practices for UAS operations in cold weather, minimizing disturbances to wildlife, emphasizing public privacy for UAS operations, and other educational resources. So what I'm hoping is that, this work plan really isn't any different than what we've been saying out loud for the past year. But I would like it if folks over the next, between now and the next meeting, if you had a chance to look at this work plan, and if you wanted to provide feedback, you're totally welcome to send that to myself and Russell. If you scroll further on down through that work plan, you can see that we actually also have this website design plan. And as Michael and I talked more and more about what this map was going to look like within the website, we recognized that we probably had to do a little bit of the website design first to make sure that what we were creating in a spatial presentation format was going to fit with what we might want to put into text. So that's where this website design plan comes in. Some of the pages that we're trying to create, who our audience is, what it is that we're actually trying to promote. So I encourage folks to take a look at that as well and see if that fits within what we had initially envisioned when we first put out that survey 2 years ago as to what is a priority for this UAS technical working group. So drilling even further down from the work plan, from the website design plan, coming into what Michael is now currently working on, that land status land status map. And I've actually, in my mind, started moving away from calling it land status map, although that is the emphasis of the map. I think what we're trying, our bigger goal is just to, is UAS operations. And, we're trying to avoid replicating anything that already exists at an FAA level, and emphasize more of the concept of like what is it that we within this technical working group as subject matter experts of UAS operations in the state from each one of our various entities, what is it that we can all bring together to this group to be able to make UAS operations smoother? And so I have a UAS operations map brainstorming document that I think I put a link to it in our meeting minutes. Yep, there it is. There's the brainstorming document. So if you wanted to open that up, what I was hoping to get out of this group within the last part of this meeting, which I feel like could kind of take up the majority of the rest of this meeting, was to identify ways that we can help Michael make the best product that we want to see. Because he's not been participating in this group or within the larger federal government, civilian federal government, or local state government, and all of our different stakeholders that attend these groups. He's not been able to participate in what our bigger vision is. So if we could flip over to the UAS operations map brainstorming side of it, I really want to make sure that we're all on the same page about what it is that we're trying to do. And I've got some suggested questions in here that we can all run through. But I recognize that with such a Well, I recognize that with such a large group, it's going to be difficult to find the best methods for getting a lot of input back. I suspected that Charlie was going to have some input on how we might be able to do this. So I see, Charlie, that you've raised your hand.
Oh, my input is very not quite as good. I just wanted to let you know that you're not sharing your screen anymore, or I'm not seeing it. I did click on the link, but for others.
Okay. I think it might have been Russell actually who was sharing his screen, but he might be back to taking notes.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So one of the things, you know, as Michael, Michael came on about maybe a month ago, got him all set up with all the admin side of it, and then we were able to get him access to the Alaska Geospatial Council's AGOL hub, and he was able to dive into some of the training that he needed to take in order to familiarize himself with setting up that hub and creating maps for it. We identified the one, I think it was within the past meeting or possibly past 2 meetings, we had a Excel sheet that was within our Google Documents that was soliciting information from group members on a landowner point of contact. And that actually doesn't have any information in it. It's only got the 2 examples in it. So there's still some work to be done on our side to be able to provide information to Michael for this map. But I think as we looked at it more, we kind of wanted to take a step back and make sure that we were really addressing the goals that this group wants to address with this map. So I guess what I'm kind of hoping from this group today is that we would say, perhaps either say the things that we think of when we think of this map, or when we think of this website, or things that we think it should not be. I think that's one of the very first places I would like to start, because we've all said, you know, we'd like to have a land status map, but I think that means different things to different people. Charlie, or go ahead.
Yeah, Britta, if I may, real quick, I just want to chime in and say, you know, going back to what you said earlier about, you know, tracking UAS operations for the park, and you know, I know in our previous discussions we've said that we weren't trying to track UAS flight data or any of that, but you know, just an idea, if we did want to try and make those operations smoother, maybe the web map could be almost like a schedule of sorts, where, you know, you've got your geographic locations for planned flights, or study areas if you guys have certain projects that you're working on, like Clay's Beetle operations, you know, flight operations. So maybe the map could contain some of that. The website, if you guys have ideas on, you know, certain information that you want in that website, I mean, whatever it might be, whether it's a reporting option, or, you know, a form for them to fill out to notify about whatever planned operations they have, and then have that link to the web map, so that when they do fill out that form, we're tracking whatever operations they might have planned inside the parks. I think that would be useful or helpful. But, you know, thinking about it from a government standpoint, it always comes back to some kind of guidance or written regulation that we're trying to follow. If there's not some kind of guidance that we can lean back on, I feel like that might put us at a slight disadvantage, because that guides a lot of the actions that we have. It would be difficult to not necessarily implement, but enforce if somebody were to be flying or conducting operations without our knowledge inside the park. Not that we're trying to enforce any type of rules, but just to make it easier for people to plan their operations and then be aware, because obviously the current climate with drones flying all over the place in different parts of the world, different parts of the country, people are a little scared of that. They just see drones flying around, they might start reporting it. But I'm just brainstorming as I'm speaking as well. So if anybody's got any ideas on where they see that going, where they this could be a multi-purpose map as well. I mean, but it needs to be clear.
Sorry, Brian.
No, go ahead.
No, I think from my standpoint, when I initially thought about like a general operations map, it was always looking at what other states have done. Basically, it was voluntary maps where people who were doing work could basically, we're operating this area. Here's our contact information. My current thought is that it's all a voluntary thing and doesn't serve much purpose. I'm more on the lines of it'd be nice to have a one-stop place where if I am Joe Public and I have a drone and I want to take pretty pictures at someplace on the ground, like maybe Kinnick River, can I do that? And then basically have like our land manager out there say, okay, here's this website you can go to. You're a general operator. Here's the requirements. But if I'm a public operator, what's the requirement? Can I just go out and take pictures? Do I need a permit? I'm at Chugach State Park, can't fly at all, period, unless you have permission. But if I jump over to say maybe Denali State Park, the rule changes. And have one-stop shop so that as a basically land manager or UAS operations, we can have some place where here's where you go for more information. That's what I'm really looking for. And that's what the ask is. I've been from other people I've talked to. Charlie?
Yeah, I'll second that. I mean, I think there were two aspects to this. One was sharing where people are flying to, in the spirit of collaboration and trying to share imagery and not duplicate if recent imagery had been collected or other data products. But I think that gets into a realm that's a lot more sensitive as far as, in particular, my role has changed quite a bit since we first started brainstorming these ideas. The other aspect of this was bringing about awareness of rules and policies that exist throughout Alaska that not every drone pilot is going to understand or be aware of easily. Things like, flights over endangered marine mammals or flights over national wildlife refuges or park service policies. And I believe that the DOT had started to put together a map that on their website that did show some of that, but I think that there isn't one that really pulls together comprehensively that I'm aware of the different policies that aren't, everyone goes through the Part 107 training through FAA, and FAA makes brief mention of other policies but doesn't go into detail. It's not Alaska specific. So coming up with that, I think, would be a useful tool for everyone to use.
So it sounds like we're kind of on the same page as to what we had thought it was. One of the questions that we've come up with regarding the land ownership contact information is that we're wondering how granular to get. So if you start to dive into some of the native allotments and their ownership and the requirements for gaining permissions to do operations on those lands, like many things related to land status in the state, it can get pretty complicated pretty quick. And so that was one of the things that when it came to the topic of contact info, I'm looking for some feedback, because it's going to be a really big lift if we need to have Michael go to every single individual possible landowner in the state to ask questions about who people need to contact if they're doing a recreational versus commercial versus partner/public UAS operation on those lands.
I don't know if I'll just speak up. I don't know if that's even possible comprehensively. Like what you're saying, Britta, it gets pretty complicated pretty quick. But what if we just had, there are public land status maps out there. So what if we started there and just included public land status on a map to give someone at least a starting point, and leave it to the local area or to leave it to the pilot to kind of track down local contact information as needed.
Michael, yeah.
Yeah, so Britta has already shared a BLM land status map with me, and I've done a little bit of research into pulling some of that data. In fact, I've already created a web feature in the ArcGIS hub in our organization content, just to kind of pull from that. That kind of information already exists, and I'm not opposed to utilizing some of the data from that. That's what it's for. It's just and I can create a minimum viable product where we are, creating almost kind of a land use map that pulls data from other sources, open sources, and creates like a unique product for ourselves. But again, the web map could potentially contain links to FFA or FAA's, before you fly program. It could definitely contain, you should not fly here, polygons that show areas where flight is recommended to contact certain personnel prior to flight, or whether flight is prohibited for that area or not. That's fine. You would think that most maps should be on the same page. If you're not allowed to fly in this area, then every map that references UAS flights should have that same data. So not opposed to including that information.
Yeah, and I certainly think, given how the interactivity of these web maps go, being able to toggle on and off things like airspace, we certainly would be able to do that. Actually, Clay, before we talk about, we get to you, I did want to respond to Charlie. Thinking about what you said, I think public. So just focusing on public lands right now might be the lowest lift, and that is a really great idea. However, I do have some questions about that that I think about really quickly. But Clay, how about I go to you first?
Yeah, I'm just thinking from the Alaska Native ownership perspective and some of the challenges I haven't seen yet, but I can foresee them. Like a lot of the villages that we serve, you might have an unimproved strip or a beach that is not going to be reflected in any FAA airspace maps, but is used a lot. And it might be a good idea to identify those and just for information. So if folks are out there on their boats doing some coastal flying, there's that nice flat beach that it might be getting used for materials for like 2 weeks, or maybe just having a polygon that says, hey, this is a auxiliary landing strip for this village, so heads up, kind of thing. It's kind of a weird one, and I don't think that data exists anywhere. It would have to go get it from these individual villages. But
Yeah. Good point. So Charlie, coming back to the public land status, so you're thinking mainly just federal, state, and local government lands?
I think that's a start. I think, there are other resources for other land status that is publicly available. Trying to move away from the term of public lands. That might be useful in providing and going on the comment that was made earlier, potentially if there is a publicly available policy for like National Park Service, for example, for use of UAS in the parks, that could be a link provided in attributes for national park lands, for example. And I know there's a lot of nuance and a lot of complicated pieces to that, but maybe that's a way to get started at least.
Yeah. Yep. So the hope is that once we have information filled out into the landowner point of contact for the public site, that would have places where there might be a link to the website for information about UAS, recognizing that there might be multiple websites for each one of the different types of operations, or no website for any of the operations. It seems like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I agree with you. That's maybe it could be that the general website would say follow FAA rules, flights are allowed from public land in this area, general state land in this area. Check with private landowners are also in this area, and you must have their permission to fly from their lands. And then have a link to something that's a little more detailed for public use, and then might be a lift, but if you're a commercial operator flying on public general state land, who do we talk to from there? And that's will be a question for like our agency.
So I just want to say I'm totally open to, attempting that lift of reaching out to, some of those native tribes, and especially those that reside within National Park Service property or any public land properties, because I do know they do have some of those spots that are just here and there within the park, according to BLM's land status map. So those, I don't mind trying to reach out to those entities, whether or not that's going to be a successful endeavor or not is still up in the air. But yeah, I mean, that is a good starting point. Something for folks to be aware of is those little patches that exist inside public land that aren't public land.
No, we wouldn't be we won't be reaching out individually to any of the tribes, given especially as representatives of the federal government. We have to let the the powers that be interact with each other, given that they, they are their own governments. So I think I think that starting with public lands would actually probably be the best bet, especially because one of the things that we're trying to do within this UAS policy group is bring together some of the biggest players in the state who have some of the oddest rules and regulations and make it a lot easier on your average operator. However, one of the things that we haven't really talked about is the different types of operations. And I do want to make sure that we touch on the public side before we spend too much time getting into the details of necessarily what we're going to display. Charlie, I didn't want to cut you off before I moved on from that, if you had something to say on this topic.
Well, I don't. One other example would be like the TAPS corridor and local policies from that. I mean, we have in various different documents, we have examples of local policy. Alyeska Ski Resort's another one. So I'm not quite sure how to incorporate those into this because it would include having some kind of polygon. So I just know there's a lot of local policies that would be good for people to be aware of. So something to think about.
Yeah. It almost seems like we should just do our best and then wait for people to tell us what we did wrong in this. But one of the things that public/partners type of operations, and actually Michael touched on this earlier, was about, the documenting planned UAS operations. So this was something that was really key during Typhoon Merbok, and there was a map that existed. I don't even recall who it was hosted by. It might have been UAF, might have been NOAA, who all the different types of both UAS operations as well as the crewed flights that were taking place for the mapping were all spatially displayed on that map. And various planned UAS operations could possibly be put on the map, but we do face that security concern, especially for various agencies conducting various types of operations. Denali wouldn't be putting our poaching recon flights on that map. So I think that would be probably like documenting, tracking planned UAS operations. I think we should keep a placeholder for it, but certainly possibly bring up a lot of document the questions that we would have regarding what that would look like and how we could especially implement it and allowing it to be editable by people when they are doing the planning and drawing out the polygon, because as we all know, that ends up being one of the biggest complications with hosting anything on ArcGIS Online. So coming back to the partners in the public, the thing that it seems like I'm not sure if we do want to host on the AGC's public facing side would be the contact information that public operators, especially for things like search and rescue and law enforcement, the numbers that people would need, immediately in the middle of the night on a Saturday. Those are the things that that question kind of keeps me up, is like, how can I make it so that if someone from like, I believe it was Frank, if he wanted to do some flights in Denali, make it as easy as possible for him to be able to understand what the procedures are, if he wasn't necessarily already tied in with the state troopers, if he was associated with a different type of search and rescue project or program. So that's something I'd actually like to, if we could pivot to and kind of discuss people's thoughts on that. I know we did say, yeah, we'd like to provide this contact information, but I'd like to discuss some of the pros and cons and challenges that we have with that. I guess nobody's got anything. Any thoughts? This was also one of those things that was born out of the response to the Typhoon Merbach that we identified in the issues was the lack of a cohesive understanding of UAS operations in various places, as well as well, many things like infrastructure and communications. I think what might be worth doing. Previously, we had, and even on the state of Alaska's DOT map that I think Ryan had made, it lumps pretty much everything into recreational, commercial, and public. Whereas I know at least within the federal government, we actually separate out public and partners, or public partners and cooperators, because they're all regulated differently within our UAS policy. So something like a search and rescue, it's going to be a lot easier to do a flight and figure it out later than it is going to be for UAF to be able to do mapping of dinosaur prints within the park, or partnering with another agency for them to come into the park, which is not the same process that it is for commercial and recreational. So I wanted to see, are there other folks on this call who have encountered differing types of UAS operations that we should also consider within this map? So we've got recreational, we've got commercial, we've got public/partners, but I would advocate for separating out public from partners, with public being something like law enforcement or search and rescue, partners being academic partners or federal agency partners. Are we missing a type of operation?
I think my issue is just parsing the terminology using. So I would classify that as a public partner versus emergency response type partner, and having that as a separate character. Yeah. I do agree, pulling emergency response out as a separate, or at least put a footnote in there saying that operations for law enforcement, emergency response, SAR, may not be covered or may need a different type of authorization.
Yeah, Britta, I don't have a lot to add, but from my end, for State of Alaska Division of Forestry and Fire Protection, it's, I anything on DOI land, I need to have a cooperative agreement to be able to do that for forestry, fire related stuff. And I almost I don't have anything to add really, but it's almost confusing talking about this public stuff to me, because it's outside of the realm of what I'm doing and trying to do.
Right. And yeah, fire is its own beast. Thankfully they have a lot of that documentation already at a much higher level than the UAS operator as to what needs to take place.
But I mean, all the partners that come on to your land are still using OPM 11 as their kind of standard guidance, right?
Not necessarily. It depends on
Okay.
actually how the Park Service, who was the asking party in the event. So, yeah. Anyways,
I didn't know that. Thanks.
So I think the next thing that what we really want to do to set Michael up for success is, how are we going to get this contact information for at least the public lands where we're going to be doing recreational, commercial, partner emergency flights. Yeah, Michael.
So I would assume that each public land entity or owner would have a point of contact. As long as I'm reaching out, I mean, I don't mind doing the legwork to reach out to some of those agencies to see who is responsible for that. And you know, the people, I realize that there's going to be work that goes into this because each person is probably not going to know exactly who, but they're going to have somebody that I can reach out to. And eventually there will be somebody that says, oh yeah, it's this person. And, you know, as long as that's an agreed upon thing, they've got their designation from their particular agency, their public entity, then, you know, I don't mind including that information. If anybody sees anything wrong with that, let me know. But I don't mind doing the legwork for those public entities.
I think given that we do have a roster of members, and for the most part, it represents at least the public lands for federal and most of the state. I think that would be the document that we want to start with for identifying people to reach out to. I think cold calling the front desk of, you know, Denali State Park is probably not the most efficient way to do it. So I guess unless anybody else has other ideas before we move on from this topic, is everybody okay with assuming that if your name is on that member roster for this UAS policy group, you can be expected to be contacted by Michael as to get information for tracking down information as to who within your organization is responsible for UAS operations and what the different types of policies are for each type of operation.
This is Ross. I'm okay with being contacted. I can handle DNR lands and send Michael to the correct person for either state parks or mental health trust or general state land.
Great. All right. So yep. So I think the next steps then are going to be having, oh man, where did I stop sharing here?
Sorry, I'm so new here.
Oh, hey Tracy.
So I just wondered if Michael and others do other states, or, you know, so you're not rewriting everything, do other states, other regions have they developed something like this that could be used as a, you know, kind of a template or a background, and then look for those unique situations in Alaska? Or are we plowing all new ground here?
That's a great question, Tracy. So I am still pretty new at developing this, and so I have not put in a lot of legwork into looking at other state programs, but you know, that's something that I could probably do tonight, this evening when I get home, is start looking at other states and see what programs or websites
policy
or
documents that are
web
written
maps they've developed.
Yeah, that might be something. I'm sure California, they're always ahead of everyone. So
Yeah.
Someone might have something. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, that was a great idea, Tracy. Thank you, sir.
And I
And
think
Baron,
Russell. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's either Arizona or California's Geospatial Council has a UAS group that had a flight tracking initiative from a couple of years ago. I need to follow up on that, but I'll find that link and send it on to you. I've not done a recent search to see if other state geospatial councils have done that. I can put an ask out because I'm in contact with a lot of state UAS people that are around mining, and I can ask them if there are examples. They should respond back pretty quickly to me.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I do think about 2 years ago when we first started discussing this, we did look at Arizona's. I want to think all of us together. But that was the only one that came to mind, unless there was one in the Midwest. All right. So I think we've made sure that we're still all on the same page about, for the most part, what we wanted to bring to this map. I think Charlie had a really great idea in that we should just start with the facing public lands, and that will hopefully help us identify what we might need to do in the future. And if we do want to start tackling things like some of the more complex land status in the state. And then Michael will be reaching out to the individuals on that policy member list, our UAS policy member list, to get that information from people over the next few months. So I think that's about all I wanted to bring up on the UAS operations map. So again, as a reminder for the next action items, take a look at that work plan, take a look at the website design. If you want to add more ideas to our brainstorming for the UAS operations map, you're welcome to make some comments in there. You can expect to hear from Michael. And I think that's about all we've got on the work plan. Russell?
Britta, real quick, does the government relation requirements apply to native corporations or just to the village level?
That is a good question. I've only known them to interact with the villages and not,
Okay.
or well, yeah, the villages that make up the corporations.
Yeah.
Maybe Clay does.
If it's a different requirement, the native corporations, at least the land status for the native and the regional and the village corporations, if you can reach out to them, that would cover most of the state right there, in terms of who the contacts would be for all operations. And you probably just have one person as the same requirement for everybody, for all types of operators.
Right. And actually, when I started looking into that, I realized we need more regional corporation representation on our calls. So that's one of the things that I think we should keep in mind. If you know anybody at those regional cores that want to participate in these calls, it'd be really awesome. Okay, so then, yeah, finally coming back to these chair nominations for new action items. You can take, if you're interested in being a chair, or you want to nominate someone and they want to know what the roles and responsibilities are, those are listed under the Geospatial Council's charter. If you want to nominate, self-nominate, please send your email with the name to Russell and myself. And then I think at our next meeting, we will be presenting those names and voting on them. And I'm not sure, we'll have to discuss what the option will be for a proxy vote. I guess it probably depends on how many nominations we get. So that's all I've got for new action items. And then I guess next meeting, Russell, do you have thoughts on our next meeting?
I'm thinking either May 8th or May 15th.
Yeah, May 15th, I think was the one I was looking at.
So I'll put that on the calendar, and if there's nobody opposed to that, May 15th would be the next meeting date. Same time.
Okay, and then we threw a couple events of interest. So we've got there's a couple different scholarship opportunities available through aviation associations that do have UAS trainings. So if you know anybody who wants to take a formal ground training for Part 107, or might be interested in following through on like a Master of Science for UAS operations at Embry-Riddle. Both of those sites will support that. We've got the Alaska Geo Summit that's coming up in April, and then the Global Autonomous Systems Conference there in August. Yeah, unless anybody else has any other thoughts, we'll go ahead and close this out.
Thanks again for keeping this going. Appreciate it.
Great, thanks.
Thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thanks for having
And
me.
I will
Yeah,
close the
thanks.
recording.
Thanks for
Thank
joining,
you.
Michael.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.